Thank you all for coming. This is a panel for role of activism in criminal justice reform. I'm Blake, this is Gabrielle. Basically, we're all part of a group in SOCI 309, Race and Ethnic Relations, and basically your task is kind of like making a project dedicated towards our specific, task, I guess, which is criminal justice reform. And we thought a panel was the best way to sort of get the information out, to learn the best ways to get involved from the experts in their field. So this is why we kind of set up this panel and sort of like the background of it.
Yeah, and I want to thank you guys again, both our panelists and our audience, for coming out tonight. Like Blake said, we know it's a really busy week and there's a lot going on, especially with it being election day. And again, like we set up this panel because we thought it was the best way to increase knowledge and education about a topic that we were all really passionate about. So we hope that everyone will take this opportunity to learn more about criminal justice reform, but also how to become more involved as a student activist and learn what you can do in our community in Houston and, you know, in the broader scope of the US, because this is an issue that affects every one of those levels. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. As a preface, I know one of our speakers that we posted about was Dieter Cantu from Texas Organizing Project. He couldn't be here tonight because he's sick, but yeah, I'm going to go ahead and introduce those of our panelists that are here. There's Ashton Woods, who is the founder of Black Lives Matter Houston. Natalia Cornelio.
No, the first one is right.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay. Okay. Natalia Cornelio, the Director of Criminal Justice Reform Project at Texas Civil Rights Project, and Jay Jenkins, the Harris County Project Attorney for the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition.
All right, so we're just going to go ahead and start getting into the questions. Also, don't forget, you can submit questions to that link right there if you have any questions after this that you want us to ask that we didn't ask during this. So first, we were just wondering from the panelists if y'all could talk about what you do, like I guess like how you're involved in advocacy and what you mainly do, like in general, I guess, towards criminal justice reform.
You want to go ahead with this one?
You go ahead, man.
All right. So, as I stated earlier, my name is Ashton P. Woods. I'm with BLM Houston. Our work is not just centered around criminal justice reform. It's about being more holistic than that. It's about looking at the connections of blackness and criminalization of blackness and how it works with our healthcare, our education. When I say healthcare, I mean mental health. I mean overall, everything that may be connected to oppression and how it affects the human body and how we navigate throughout our lives as people who happen to be black and brown. Now, as far as mass incarceration is concerned, or even criminal justice, one of the things, or the greatest examples that I can give, is I helped to work on the Sandra Bland Act that passed last year. And people don't understand that knowing who to be mad at, as I stated at the earlier panel, is important, because when you know who to be mad at, you know the people you can go work with. What made the Sandra Bland Act so special, for example, was the summer that she was murdered, Garnett Coleman called a committee into order, and he let activists testify. Family members of Sandra Bland, classmates of Sandra Bland, co-workers of Sandra Bland, where she was going to be starting at Prairie View, testify. And that was actually the basis of the bill. And that's something to get people out there mobilized to be able to, like, arrange rides and trips to Austin for people to testify and to get information out to people at the most basic level so that they can take action in whatever way that it will work for them. So, yeah.
So my name is Natalia Cornelio, and I am an attorney and the Director of Criminal Justice Reform at the Texas Civil Rights Project. So how does my work relate to criminal justice reform? So that's my project, and we mostly litigate, which means we sue governments, organizations, entities, usually governments, that are violating people's civil rights. But relating to that, number one of the responsibilities in my view as an attorney that does this kind of work is to be closely connected with members of the community, who educate me on what the needs are of the community when it comes to lawsuits. So in that vein, Jay and I actually work together pretty regularly in what's called the Right to Justice Coalition. We have the ACLU on board, TOP, the Texas Organizing Project, and we're able to communicate and share with one another things that we learn about stuff that's going on in the community. And similar to what Ashton was saying, you know, I think of criminal justice reform as more than just mass incarceration. It applies at all levels. It applies at, you know, juvenile. The work, Jay can talk a little bit about this in depth, but the criminalization of students and kids while they're in school for things that become labeled crimes, entering kids into the system, mental health treatment, re-entry issues and reforms that need to happen, and communities being really resistant to letting people back into their communities after they've served their time. So criminal justice is a really broad concept to me that has a lot of needs and applies to a lot of people in various communities.
Yeah, so my role, I sort of just work on whatever's out there. I've managed to sort of finagle. My organization, Texas Criminal Justice Coalition, is primarily based in Austin. I'm the only one that's not in Austin, and it's interesting that what Nada said, and with Ashton up here too. I think one of the things that we're being asked to do across the state now is sort of replicate the coalitions we have in Houston, and part of the reason is that in Houston, unlike a lot of other places, including Austin, I view my role like Nada views hers, is I'm responsive to the community. I don't go and pick an issue that I think is cool and work on it. We go and reach out to the community and talk to them about what it is, what problems they're facing, what policies are the policies that are sort of holding them back, and then we work on those. And I think that's been a big help in Houston, for one, so that no one sort of gets it twisted about what the work is about. And the work is about helping people in the community. It's not about getting your name in the paper. It's not about writing, it is about helping people in the community. And in other areas, particularly Austin, it's all about sort of this high level, like what policies should we dictate for these people who don't have a voice? But really our job should be giving those people a voice, not speaking for them, but giving them a voice. So I try to help with litigation where I can. I try to connect organizers where I can, and generally just keep the ball rolling forward.
Awesome. So our second question is somewhat related to the first, but what pushed you to get involved with criminal justice reform activism? Like whether it was that this issue always affected you and it was something that you felt like you needed to dedicate your life to, or was there a turning point in your life? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know how to answer that, like, honestly, No, I can't bullshit you. Here's the thing. I grew up a black boy in New Orleans, so the police were always looking at people like me walking down the street minding their own business. First time I stepped outside after dark and sat on the steps of my porch and walked in the middle of the street to pick up some glass and move it out of the way so a car won't roll over it with their tire possibly bursting. Cop stops me, put me in the back of his car. I'm in front of my house. I explained this to him. Show my ID. It wasn't until my aunt pulled up and I yelled at the top of my lungs from the back of this cruiser that this cop had to let me go. I was going to go to jail that night. I was going to be 14, 15 years old in jail, in a system, and then perpetually stuck in that system afterwards, because they were going to do what? Target me. Because what do cops do? Work the same neighborhood often. The bigger thing is that I remember being 20. One of my most memorable police stops was when I was getting my footing after Hurricane Katrina. I'm an evacuee. I'm a Katrina survivor. And I was running down Gessner and Richmond to a cab. It was 2005, so cabs was in. It was before Uber and Lyft. You actually had to call them from your cell phone, the little flip ones. And the next thing I know, I'm running and the cop pulls up on the sidewalk in front of me, and takes me and didn't ask me my name and is trying to put me in the car. My partner at the time caught this, and he stopped the police officer. He said, no, he's with me. We're catching that cab driver right there. The cab driver got out of the car and said, no, he's taking the cab. I said, listen, sir, I don't know who you're looking for. I'm from New Orleans. I don't know this area that good. You got the wrong Negro. Well, you fit the description. So at this point, I'm ready to punch the fuck out of this officer. At this point. That's how it feels. It's like you have to defend yourself against these people, because it's either you or them. I'd rather go to jail for defending myself against the cop than the cop murdering me. You want to send me to jail any fucking way. Period. So when they got over the radio, read the description out. 5'6", dark skin, Black shorts and a white t-shirt. What did Ashton have on? Ashton, 6 feet tall, caramel complexion, wears glasses, blue jeans, tank top. Do I look like the man in the description that they're looking for? No. There are several reasons why I do this. There's several reasons why I do this. The other reason is I just left a polling place today. I watched the elderly lady get refused a right to cast her vote because she was told that she was in the wrong precinct. When I pulled her information up on the phone, what happened? She was in the right place. And I made them let her catch the ballot. This is the stuff that people don't see all the time. This is the stuff that makes me do what I do.
Yeah, so that is a hard question. When I was younger, my family's kind of crazy. I have plenty of people who are alcoholics and violent and kind of scary, like to the point where I could have gone the other way and been like a go victims of crime, protect people at all costs, put a camera everywhere if it means you're safe person. But I was also kind of a nerd, maybe a lot of a nerd, and quiet and observant in certain ways, and I cared a lot about fairness and dignity and the body is sacred. And myself and people that I saw had a lot of experiences where the feeling that they were powerless was really prevalent to me. And the more that I learned about the criminal justice system truly being a system that affects millions of lives, the more that I started to think that they were the same thing, where laws were used to cast people off and dismiss them and treat them poorly and take away dignity and handcuff them and shackle them and put them behind bars. And the kind of thoughtlessness in the processes of creating rules that treats people in that way really struck me. So since I was, pretty young, that was something that was important to me. I was like, I want to be a public defender, which I was before I came here. And in that experience, I learned an incredible amount about the lack of dignity that people who experience, encounters with the police have, especially people that look like the boy version of me. Yeah. And
so it's funny because I always like to tell this story when I'm asked this question, but with Ashton's, I'm sort of the anti-Ashton. I grew up in Iowa, a child of privilege, and even still, I managed somehow to get arrested a few times. And even as someone that grew up in Iowa, in a state where we don't have in Iowa the same commitment to putting human beings in cages. And part of that in Iowa comes from our lack of diversity, frankly, that we don't have that. But with, me going through the process a few times with a supportive, and not supportive in this, but with the family that has resources to deal with it and would make sure that I made it sort of out on the other, end of it okay, I still felt powerless. And in those experiences, I started to wonder, well, if me, Jay Jenkins, an idiot, drunk teenager, or, in Iowa, is feeling powerless in this, where the system is designed, for me to be successful, for me to get out of it with, where it doesn't hurt my career, and then to see some of this other stuff happening to folks without the resources, that don't live in places where the systems are as evolved as Iowa. It really, really got to me. And then in law school, partly because of those experiences, I started a juvenile justice clinic in Chicago and really saw some stuff that it's a long ways from West Des Moines, Iowa. But that feeling of powerlessness that I had was magnified 100,000 times for these folks without the resources to fight some of this stuff. And so knowing that this system exists and it treats people differently based on the resources they have just really bothered me. And so, yeah, that's how I ended up doing this kind of work.
All right, so our next question is, why do you think the criminal justice system actually needs reform? And if you point in specifics, or I guess it's kind of a broad question, but just to see what your input on that is.
Think about the PR bond issue. Do you guys know about what Judge Miss Patton said in the last 2 weeks by show of hands? There's a judge. 1 hand, 2, 3. So 4 people in here know what Judge McSpadden said. Judge McSpadden is quoted in the Houston Chronicle as saying, black men are a risk, as the reason why he will not issue a PR bond. Let me go back and go circle around on what that means for you. Remember I brought up the Sandra Bland Act? Well, around that same time, Rodney Ellis was Senator Rodney Ellis before he became County Commissioner Ellis. He's one of the people who helped to work on the PR bonds bill. And my main question while being in that room and listening to testimony for and against was, when you put this in the judge's hands, can we trust them to issue these bonds for victimless crimes, these PR bonds, instead of setting a bail? The answer is no. Because over the last 10 years, about 14 judges have denied or instructed their magistrates to not issue PR bonds. Harris County is known as one of the biggest debtors' prisons in Texas, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. There are people sitting in jail right now, sometimes for years at a time, because they cannot afford to pay a bail bond, while magistrates are tacking on an extra $1,000 to young women who say yeah instead of yes. That's what we're talking about here. So when we talk about reform, are we talking about taking and make a system that is really geared against people who look like me and her? Or abolish it, but in a way that has a foundation that provides a remedy for when someone, gets murdered, as opposed to it's just carrying a small amount of marijuana, walking down the street trying to get a little black joy in their life? What's the difference? There are people right now who are walking away from murders with probation, while people who look like me are getting years in prison for carrying a little bit of weed in their pocket. You tell me.
Yeah.
My answer is quick. It's racist. The criminal justice system is racist, and that is number one. And until we fix that, we cannot have a criminal justice system that society can trust in.
I don't know if y'all are familiar with the concept of the prison industrial complex, but as a concept, the criminal justice system does not serve any purpose for society except for some diluted, convoluted, capitalistic looking system. It provides jobs for people that jail people, for people that prosecute people, for people that arrest people, and it has no reflection on itself of what that means to society and what kind of society we want to be. So the broad question gets the broad answer.
So as a follow-up, what do you see as the most pressing issue within criminal justice reform? Whether that's policy, if it's like specific policies or policing, or whether you think that it's all intertwined?
The biggest issue is racism. I mean, it infects every single piece of the puzzle, like from start to finish. From who gets picked up, from which lawyer they get, from which lawyer prosecutes them, to what offers they get. From start to finish, every piece of the criminal justice system is tainted with racism.
I would go further, right? I mean, we saying racism, but that's just like the topical, right? That's like putting some Ambisol on the toothache as opposed to going to the dentist and getting a root canal, right, to get it all fixed. Well, we need the root canal. It's time for the fucking root canal, okay? Here's the thing. We talk about racism, we talk about colorism, we talk about elitism, classism. I mean, social problems create what? Social change. We're looking right now at a situation where people need to be able to learn how to name things. There are people in Black Houston, which is all over Houston, and Brown Houston, which is all over Houston, in different areas, right? Who, if we said the things that we said to them on this panel, it would sound very academic. And the problem with talking about criminal justice reform and just really to answer that question, is making sure that the people have the names and the definitions to call out what is being used to hurt them. You cannot go somewhere and send someone in to talk about their story without articulating what it means, and it is our responsibility to make sure that they know what they need to say and that they speak on their own terms and that we're not dictating them, but that they're speaking from their true experience. Lived experience is extremely important in this. We have to tell the stories about the black women who are increasingly exposed to rates of HIV, right? And how does that connect to mass incarceration? Well, increasingly women are being incarcerated at almost nearly the same rate as black men now, black women. Nearly. I mean, it's exploding. And you think about the fact that people are not automatically given or asked if they need counsel when they're in front of a Harris County magistrate, and they don't get appointed public defenders. I mean, think about the fact that there are people, when I brought up HIV, going into Harris County right now who are not being tested for HIV, not being treated for HIV if they are having it, and we're actually having to come up with ways for them to treat people physically, mentally, and emotionally so that they won't go back to jail. We don't see too many re-entry programs. We don't see any of the things that would be needed for someone who might have gone to jail for 5 years and could use, I don't know, $100 stipend and a cell phone that works for about a month to be able to get in touch with people and get work, right? We need to be able to make sure that people need housing, right? You get your housing, and it's always put in the area where you're liable to be stopped by the police. And I want you to understand, today is election day, and as sure as I tell you, if you go to West Time on Highway 6 right now, most of the Section 8 housing is on the other side of Highway 6 by West Oaks Mall. You're a City of Houston resident, but you cannot vote in the election. But the majority of the housing is Section 8. You tell me what the problem is. School to prison pipeline? Maybe. Think about it. In a year, there may not be an HISD. Remember that capture program that they voted on last year? If you paid attention to that? That said that the HISD owes the state about close to $300 million. They're trying to close schools, and the majority of the schools that they're trying to close are black and brown. They're trying to charter those schools. Charter schools are easily one of the most acceptable ways to push someone into the school to prison pipeline. There's a lot of shit to unpack.
And I would just add something you said and that Jorge said earlier that was very poignant. You know, it's a combination of people that are making decisions that affect criminal justice, and everyone that's affected by the system have no stake or accountability in that system or no knowledge, and no one cares. And the people that are most affected, the people that receive convictions, the people that are in jail, the people whose families are in jail, they don't get heard. And they don't have a voice, and they're literally disenfranchised, legally speaking. You know, people in jail can't vote. People out of jail can't vote unless their sentence is discharged. And then there's other barriers that society presents because it's not important to us to care. And I think that would be a really important place to start any reform, is to give a voice to the people that are actually affected and treat them with some dignity and say, okay, well, what do I have to take into account when I'm making these policies from your perspective?
Thank you. For the next question, we're going to focus a little more on the activism side. And we're just curious what you guys think is the best way for students to get involved with activism, or ways students can try to help out the cause, or anything like that.
Volunteer with us.
What makes you mad? Seriously, what makes you mad? Ask yourself that, start there. What makes you mad, and find out how it affects you intersectionally, right? The first thing that I thought about before I knew what to call it was, I knew I was gay. I always knew. I didn't know that my freshman year in high school that I would help to start the first gay straight alliance in the city of New Orleans ever, in front of a student body of 2,500 students on a closed circuit, you know, not morning announcements, but closed circuit TV mock news, on video, with a Jehovah's Witness grandmother sitting at home. I wound up being homeless after that. I think activism has phases and growth, right? I remember where I looked at the intersectionality of being LGBT in conjunction with blackness, and I focused more about my blackness than I did about being gay, because the first thing that you see is black, and then you see male, and that equates to danger. I'm probably, the pit bull of humans, so to speak. You know, they're probably the most looked down on animals right now, and they're probably some of the most gentle. The problem is that I'm at a crisis right now because I'm transitioning in my activism right now. I call myself a human rights activist, but a lot of people call me a Black Lives Matter activist because of my work that essentially focuses on Black lives, and it always will. But I also recognize the need in understanding that if I succeed and my community succeeds, everybody benefits from it, not just my community. And, you know, the partnerships that we've established in activism here in Houston is something that's actually very important because a lot of places, the Latinx community and the Black community don't see eye to eye. You know, people don't understand that there's such a thing as Afro-Latino. People don't understand that there's a diaspora of Blackness, not just the African diaspora, but that we come from all different walks of life, and that our Blackness, in whatever way we see ourselves in, represents to the rest of the world. So activism is this thing that constantly changes. Your body changes, so does activism. You start to learn that maybe there were certain things that, yeah, you would love to burn down the jails and abolish the police, and then you realize that there are like 346 million people that you. And what's the plan after you demolish the systems that are oppressive? Where do we go from there, right? And I don't believe anybody's asking the question about what happens after we reach this goal to continue to make sure that human rights actually thrive, as opposed to, oh, we got this and we got to stop, right? So ask yourself, is this for me? Am I willing to put myself on the line and be public and have people who look like me and who don't look like me attack me? Ask yourself, are you okay with death threats? Ask yourself, are you okay with lack of employment? Because I can tell you, working for nonprofits don't pay well, and that if you're in the street cussing the police out and collecting white tears and throwing hands at you know, racist grandpas, I'm gonna tell you now, you will not make a lot of money. Activists do not get paid, and when you reach a certain level of notoriety like I have, it's very hard to find work. Unless you're working in the electoral politics or you're consulting in some way, shape, or form. Really, to be honest with you. So you have to think about you, your family, your chosen family, your loved ones, partners, people who are around you and how they're going to be affected. And at a certain point, you have to make sure that when you're ready, you step out and you don't worry about what other people have to say. Because if you had to ask who was going to fix it and you decide to step up to fix it, that means that you're doing what you needed to do. Let them be where they are. But I hope that helps you. Just find what you're angry at, see how it's connected to your life and to your friends, and work from there.
And walk your life in dignity, you know, consistent with who you are and what you believe. And the more you learn about yourself, you know, try to hold yourself accountable to yourself, because that's the strongest form of activism. I mean, activism takes a lot of different forms. I'm an attorney. I don't know if I'm an activist. But, you know, it just depends. But the other thing I'll say to you all specifically is you're at Rice University. So this is a really beautiful environment for you all to be in, to feed and have fed whoever you are. You know, like, use the resources around you. You have space. There's funding for different activities. There's a meeting space. You have, you know, thank you guys for organizing something relating to something that you all care about. This is your time to really take that investment in you and run with it. And don't be afraid to ask the university to support you. That's why you're here. That's why they have you here.
Don't ask them, make them.
Make them.
There are people who work here that support activism. One of your admissions counselors, Brandon Mack, if you know him, he's actually a member and organizer with Black Lives Matter Houston. He's also my best friend. There are people here, if you utilize the resources the correct way, you can make some changes here, and you can take that to other universities too if you need to.
And all I would add to that is that, you know, the fallout from the shooting in Florida has shown the teens are going to lead us, and y'all are like part of that generation where, like, I hate to say it, but I mean, I literally just left my apartment where I was arguing with my girlfriend about, like, no, like, people of my generation, I think, are like, we've lost, like, too many of them think the same way that the prior generations think, that the criminal justice system is necessary, that like these low-income neighborhoods are policed because they're criminal and not because they're black and brown. Like, I have a lot of folks from Iowa that buy into that garbage. And one of the things I did a panel here last year, and I said forever this debate has been dragged to the right, to the point where like we have dehumanized people so much that I think last year a student that was like a member of an anarchist or a left, those people need to be a part of the conversation, because the other extreme is out there and in power, right? Like this Donald Trump wanted to execute the Central Park Five like the next week. Like that is as extreme a view as you can have to the right, and he's the president. And the way the process works, if we don't have those voices speaking out on the left, we end up getting dragged further and further to the right, and losing our humanity. I mean, I kind of like I don't know that I'm an activist, but like get in where you fit in and find something that works, or it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be the person in front of the camera, but you can help. Like, and that's again, like our coalition in Houston has done a really good job of, we've got all these different sort of types of organizations, and so if I need a lawyer or a legal expert, I can talk to Nada. If we've got an event, we can get Ashton, because we know Ashton's the best activist we have here, right, to draw these crowds. So it all fits together. And I promise you, it's not intimidating. Like we all, like not working for nonprofits, we don't have the budget to do a lot of the stuff that folks.
We've gotten more done with no money than people who have $1 million budgets in Houston.
No money's fun.
And what was funny was we were all at the airport at Bushel and Continental when everybody got detained last year around this time, and they were shitting bricks because they were not used to seeing us work together. We exposed ourselves to them. They don't know that we all work together and that we walk in tandem, and that when I make a move, they make a move. Yep. That's how that's how this has to work. If you don't do that and you try to go it alone, you will either make some really bad decisions or do something in haste, and you will regret it.
So we wanted to save our Anon questions for last, but one of them actually fit in well where we are in the discussion right now, and it is, Rice can often function as a bubble where students only engage in the outside world if and when they want to. How do you get people to care about activism in general, especially when this requires putting in effort into feeling discomfort, grief, and shame?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah.
That was a lot.
So, in summary, the first thing is, Rice is a bubble. We typically stay within the hedges. And the question is, how do you get people to care about activism, especially when this requires putting effort into feeling discomfort, grief, and shame?
Well, you can't force anybody to do anything, definitely not to be an activist. So, find your allies. And maybe that support systems are important. So if you can't find them inside of Rice, because it's so much of a bubble that putting yourself out there and saying these things makes you feel vulnerable in those ways, go outside of Rice. It's a really big city out there. We're here. There's a lot of organizations, groups, people. Sometimes they're unorganized, but sometimes that's okay. And there's a lot of really cool things out there, a lot of history, So, and find people that can support you and you can learn from and grow with together, instead of feeling the words that you described negative.
I would just say, if you're the type of person that's interested in this work, then the comfort or the discomfort and the grief and the shame that you have every day, being a part of this larger system without doing, I mean, that's what sort of got to me too, was that, yes, it's uncomfortable to put myself out there, but I sleep a lot better at night when I have. I don't worry, and there is some freedom in speaking truth to power, and these hang-ups about feeling we should feel discomfort. Humans are locked in cages downtown. They got 12-year-olds locked in cages on like some school fight stuff. We should be uncomfortable when we do this work because we are living in like a very brutal, oppressive system right now. And if we don't do the work, then it's only gonna get worse.
I would say that and that, but I would also add that I don't remember what my mind was at the time when I started doing all of this. I can't tell you that. I just knew that I was always pissed off, and I always knew how to identify the microaggressions before I knew to call them microaggressions. And I don't know, for something in me, I just hated injustice in general. So 2014, I was already doing stuff, but this is when I would say that I just said screw it. And if you're offended by what I have to say and what other people who look like me have to say, you're part of the problem. Simple. There's nothing frilly or like spectacular about it. The real truth is that there's a level of fearlessness that you get where it's just kind of like you only thinking about the people. You're thinking about the people who are going to benefit from what you and what you're doing with other people, how they may benefit from that work, right? Because at a certain point, it becomes you're a servant to your community. It becomes less, I want to be an activist, and less, I need to be heard because I have something to say. It becomes, you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, a couple of days after your friends got shot at in Dallas, and you're standing over the blood of Elva Brazil after they took the body. And you hear the family behind you to the right-hand side by the gas station crying. And the news cameras just recording it all. And reporters just yapping away. If you're going to do this, make sure that you take care of yourself. It is important that you get therapy. It is important that you have a network and a support system, because when you do this, it is lonely and it hurts a lot. And it's not that it's a bad thing. It hurts because there's some things that you want to do and you just cannot do it, and you have to sit there and be helpless. But you also have to remember that in that helplessness, how are the people who you're feeling helpless to help, how are they dealing with it? How do they process it? How do they go to sleep? What are they eating? Right? Because you think about people who are predatory, the people who, I want you to give me $1,000 up front for me to help you people. No one in this community, no one should be taking money from anyone in whatever community that you're in, intersectionally speaking, to help them. You show up, you do what you need to do, and that's why it's important to network and to work with different groups, to have access to people to where you don't have to have a news conference to get something. You just make a phone call, right? Because you gotta start getting out there. You might be anti-electoral politics, right? I don't like politicians like that, but I know that I can call a few of them and be like, listen, I know somebody who needs an extension on their housing voucher. They got 3 months to find something, and nobody wants to lease to anybody who is on Section 8. You give them 3 months, and then they come up, and then you don't give them an extension, and now they're homeless. Right? And so, like I said, it's about making sure that you're honest about what you're doing, making sure that you're honest with the people who you have around you, and you better damn sure have people you trust, because they will try to hurt you. If you start saying stuff that makes their livelihood uncomfortable or takes their livelihood away from you, you are a threat. Always remember that you are a threat. When you open your mouth and you take those first steps to do what you need to do in order to call out justice or injustice, you are a threat. You need to be okay with that. And once you become okay with that, it'll be a lot easier for you to do what needs to be done.
All right, so the next question is kind of related to what Mr. Jenkins said before, or was he was like referring to before within different narratives.
You call me Jay.
Okay. What Jay was referring to earlier today with the narratives before. What's the best way, how do you recommend responding and confronting the alternative narratives going around in the media, around social media, etc.?
It's an interesting question, because I think one thing is that and this is something Nat and I have dealt with, that the powers that be, the people that have the power, are incentivized to sit down with you and have a meeting with you and tell you like, oh yeah, we're going to fix it. We're going to fix it. And if you come at them in any way, and Nada and Ashton's done this more than Nada and I could dream about, but at city council, if you come at some of these folks with truth, like their response is going to be to divert to talk about another issue. And today we saw it when we're testifying about housing, all of a sudden our very short, simple statements that this distance requirement is going to put reentry housing out of business became, oh, do you know the stat? Michael Kubash asked me tonight if I knew how many people
got to you again.
It was how many people coming home from TDCJ go home to their families. And what you have to remember is it's not our job to do that. We've presented a clear, like, you will lose your mind trying to answer all of Michael Kubash's questions because Michael Kubash doesn't want anything to happen. And it's not just Michael Kubash. The city and the county, they like the status quo, and they will send you off on nine different journeys to answer questions that don't need to be answered. So if you come with truth, and this is something that I've learned here in Harris County, we started pulling numbers and the judges didn't have an answer for it. And so the first thing we did was pull the numbers on how many times a judge had lowered bail from what the magistrate said. And the first pull we made, it was less than 1% from the bail schedule. And so we got that into the hands of a reporter, and the reporter said, Your Honor, this is the number. And that judge said, that's not right. And the reporter said, well, can you point me to numbers that disprove it?
The DA's office can't even track the diversion program.
Exactly. And the answer is the people that are losing this, the other side, they don't have the actual answers. So you don't need to waste your time chasing down their little and that's what they told Megan, no, those numbers aren't right, but it doesn't feel right. And we have to make our case, at least initially sometimes with the numbers we have, and the search for the perfect answer or the perfect stat, it's never going to come. It's sort of, you have to paint the picture using all the stats that you can. But I would say this idea that, how are you going to convince someone that thinks all black people should go to jail, that or that, black people committed crimes that they didn't? I don't know that you can. And I don't know that it's worth your time or sanity to engage some of those folks.
Yeah. No, I think that last part is definitely true. I would recommend arming yourself with critical thinking, Try to take a pause. The more you do this kind of work too, it becomes like you want to say something. You want to have the answer. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just really need to take a pause and say, what do I want to know to figure out what I think about that? And then on the other side of it, this is a ton of work, but I'm a big believer in storytelling, fiction to represent truth or truth. A lot of stories are not told. And then the only perspective out there is the one that's maybe incomplete and ends up harming people because it's being acted on without having enough information. And it's a ton of work to put story out there. I know a lot of lawyers that like to learn the law and know the law, but when it comes to interviewing their clients, when it comes to interviewing their clients' families, when it comes to talking to people in the community, going to see the spot where the thing happens, they don't do that work because it's a lot. But it's really important. It's really important to see that and to understand that, and for that story to be told, for the picture to be complete and not reduced to papers or one perspective.
Awesome. So we're now going to move on to the anonymous questions that you all submitted. And again, you're not out of time, use this URL if there's any more questions that you have or that you think of while our panelists are speaking. So the first is, how do you plan to stop the private prison movement in Texas? For example, the new Jim Crow laws.
First of all, we got to get certain elected officials out of office. There are some elected officials who hide behind Democrat and Republican who have investments in private prisons. Did y'all hear about the new detention center that they want to build in Montgomery County? Who's paying for it? You know, the one where they want to hold undocumented folks from different nationalities because, I don't know, they just exist. There's a lot, you know. I don't even know where to begin or end on that.
Well, one important thing that I will say, we do this work, but that question, how do you plan on ending the private prison, is one example of how that question does injustice to the problem. Ashton's not going to do it by himself. Right. I'm not going to do it. Jay's not going to do it. I mean, somebody asked that question. I was like, Ashton, how are you going to do that?
Right?
You know, I think
Come on, man.
As a society, if we care, even if you're not doing all the work, the better question is, how are we going to end the problem? I don't remember the question. Fix the private prison problem. How are we going to take this on? How are we going to handle it? How are we going to think about it? Because if the responsibility is put on people that, you know, do certain parts of the work,
right?
We're just 3 people.
Yeah, I mean, think about this for a second. Devin Anderson was the district attorney and Ron Hickman was the sheriff. And then you had Ray Hunt, who was the HPD's, what do you call that, union? Yeah. The police union. Mm. People don't understand that people, when they're in these elected officials, go to the state legislature and they tell their friends who are the legislators to kill or support a bill. When you have the wrong people who sit in offices, whether it be a mayor or a city council member, who can drive the 2.5 to 3 hours to Austin and say they don't like something, you get rid of them and you put people in who will talk to you first before they go and talk to the legislator and say, listen, we need this bill. So you have buy-in. Why am I saying this? You think about how a bill works in the state. It's important that you understand the 2 bodies that you want to attack when you want to get rid of the private prison system or abolish prison in general, or mass incarceration in general, is the County Commissioner's Court in Harris County and the Texas Legislature. County Commissioner's Court decides on how money is spent on prisons. They decide on how much money is spent on the Harris County Hospital District across the street. They make all those decisions, even that park. They make that decision. Those are the people you want to talk to. If you want to get rid of bail in Harris County, all you gotta do is go and talk to the Commissioner's Court. You don't even have to get the legislature to even pass a bill. You get the right people on that court, they can literally have a vote up or down and get rid of bail bonds, amongst other things, right? And then to piggyback on that, when you go to the legislature, now that you have people who may be in your corner, you bring your friends with you. You go and testify. You sit in the office and say, well, you need to take this out and put this in. And then you work with people. Some of the biggest successes that we had on the Sandra Bland Act, and actually a couple other bills, is that we had more conservative Republican support, to my shock and disbelief, than we had Democratic support for some of these bills.
Yeah.
You will learn quickly that there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, and strange bedfellowships always exist in this situation.
Yeah, and Ashton said something earlier about the sort of holistic approach to activism in the criminal justice system, and the private prison stuff is a really good example of how focusing on one thing, you can miss the forest for the trees, because years and years and years of work went into
shutting. Got a lot of them closed.
Yeah. We shut down prisons in the state of Texas.
Most of them are state run now.
But the ones that aren't state run now, because of our president, are now being turned into immigration detention centers, right? Like, and so focusing too narrowly on one issue, given how things can shift, will leave you sort of grasping like we shut down those prisons, and then they're all of a sudden they're being repurposed as immigration detention centers. And that's sort of that's the what you miss if you focus on with laser focus on one thing, I think.
All right, so the next submitted question was, what's the least successful form of activism, or forms of activism that may harm the movement?
A sexist, homophobic pig. Really. Anybody who cannot understand intersectionality and that everything doesn't look one way, or that solution is the end-all, be-all instead of an all-of-the-above strategy, be very, very aware of them. Run. The reason why is this. We live in a situation that is so unique today that everything is a solution. Everything is on the table. Y'all got to understand how important shit is right now. There are people who are literally dying. Right now. There are people being denied abortions. There are people who are being murdered for being gay, straight, bisexual, transgender. There's so many things. I don't know. The best way I could put it, I said this in Nagadoches at Stephen F. Austin. Have you ever been called a fag and a nigger in one sentence and try to figure out how to respond to either one first? And all of the straight people in the audience gasped because they couldn't understand why I used the N word and why I used the F word. But the truth of the matter is that we have to be able to call things out in order to have a conversation. And right now we live in a very puritanical society where everybody's docile as fuck and nobody wants to talk about something and everybody wants to be happy and they want to, you know, after Black Panther, but they don't know, they don't understand that when you do something like this, it means something. It means that you got to get up off your ass, whether it means metaphorically you get in there, if you know how to build websites, you get there and you find an organization and say, listen, let me help you with your websites. Let me help you with your digital. Let me help you with your social media. It's not just getting out there and protesting, y'all. All of the stuff that we're talking about here is predicated on one thing. Working with people who are not afraid to work with other people. No, I don't trust white people, but I also know that not all white people are bad. I just don't need white people to tell me that not all white people are bad. It's like men don't need to be telling women not all men, right? Nobody gives a damn. We understand that you might be good, but shit, continue. Do you want a gold star or a fucking cookie? So the crux of the point is that you be very careful and make sure that you be impeccable as hell about your word. And make sure if you don't know, you say you don't know. And make sure you never make any promises except for the shit that you know you can do. And stay away from people who do things like that.
I'm wary of and like I think the question gets to a bigger issue here. And that civility is a tool that is used by oppressors to oppress people.
Respectability politics.
And I'll tell you, there is no bad, like the bad forms of activism are the activism of people that are against my activism. But like if you believe in stuff, you should never feel like what you're doing to further that goal is, you should be ashamed of it or it's hurting the cause. It never hurts. And that's the dirty little secret that Ashton knows more than both of us. They hate it when you make a scene. They hate it but you know what happens when you make a scene? Shit gets done. The teachers in West Virginia struck for 5 days and got erased for not just themselves that they wanted, but for the entire state employee. There is power in these actions, and the people that are telling you there are, bad forms of activism are the people that are trying to hold on to that power.
People who want to own you, not free you. People take ownership. They act like it's theirs and not ours. Be very aware of them people.
I agree with them.
The next question is, has there been any success with activism and criminal justice reform in Texas? If so, please cite specific examples.
Who wrote that?
Who's the feds?
Out yourself.
Who wrote an exam question and gave it to us?
I feel like I'm taking the LSAT. Go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Man, well, I just got here. I think that the Sandra Bland Act is a great example of real form of activism having success in Texas. I think that the lawyers litigating the bail bond lawsuit in Harris County is a good example of activism that was successful.
Yes.
And I think that, what else do we got? Those are the two ones that come to mind.
Well, we stopped legislation against the LGBT community twice, specifically the trans community, the bathroom bills. Y'all got to remember, people follow us in Texas. We always at the state capitol in a rotunda scaring the little white men walking around in their little suits, drinking their Dr. Pepper. That's what you got to do.
And that's a good point too, is that unfortunately, a lot of the successes we have in the state of Texas are beating back even worse stuff than the status quo. But that doesn't make it any less of a success, right? And I would say, you know, we've had some success on the drug stuff, although again, you know,
Right.
like
SB 1913 is a good example of success too.
well, so we got Devin Anderson to start doing drug diversion, which, you know, is
Getting rid of her was a good example of success.
yeah. So both moving her on that issue and then moving her out
But she
of
would
the
never
office.
say. But she would never say who.
Exactly.
She was
Oh yeah.
diverted.
Oh yeah. And but we've been able to shift the framework a little bit, but like the work isn't, like I said with the private prison question, the work isn't going to end. If we fix the bail stuff tomorrow, they will be figuring out a different way to lock poor black and brown people up. That's just the reality of the situation. So while we've had these victories, it's great. And again, what sort of bothers me sometimes is a lot of times in the policy community, like you get a story in the paper and that's considered like, okay,
Right.
like we've done our job, but like, even though getting a story in the paper is a slog sometimes, right? Like
Right.
the real work is taking that newspaper story and going to those communities and showing them this to say, you should feel safe to tell your story here. One thing I tell people all the time about my work is that, like, and again, growing up in Iowa, I guess I was just conditioned to be, you know, you hear stories about police brutality and stuff, and if it's not your lived reality, you have this like inherent skepticism of it. But the folks in the community that are telling you about their experiences with, I've not met one in the city of Houston that was lying to me about stuff, right? But the larger, you know, the powers that be and sort of other folks in the society would have you believe that some of this stuff is rarer than it is. And so it really starts with listening to the community and builds from there, but we always have to keep the community in mind when we're doing the work.
Well, I think about the marijuana diversion program that's under Kim Ogg right now. It's probably one of the most successful diversion programs in the country. One of the first things we got her to do, actually, as a matter of fact, because BLM Houston is a part of the coalition. And
Yeah.
you carry a certain amount of marijuana, they're not prosecuting the charges. There's a 75% participation rate at this point, with the exception of the anomaly of Hurricane Harvey. It's working really well. Basically, if you get stopped by the police and you have marijuana on your person, even if you got stopped before, they have to call the district attorney's office, and the district attorney tells that cop whether or not that they can arrest you. And basically, they tell them to just give you this information. It doesn't go in the system. It's not on the record because you were never arrested. All you have to do is sit in a class on a Monday, Wednesday, or Saturday for 4 hours, and you walk away scot-free. Think about it for a second. You live in a state where the state constitution actually governs for cities and municipalities to make their own rules. The city of Houston, if they wanted to, could literally legalize marijuana within the city limits, and it would actually be legal by state law. Know your shit. You can play with the system and make the system work for you.
So our next minute question is the criminal justice system, specifically police and prisons, actually necessary?
Criminal justice system, police and prisons.
I don't think so. We see plenty of other civilized countries across the world make it work in a different way. We see those same countries that are better at recidivism. They're better, like people are rehabilitated quicker, and so I don't know. I don't think it is, and this is another, uniquely American thing. That we're sitting here, it's been ingrained in my mind since I was born that this is a part of life, and that, if we didn't have prisons, all these bad people would get out. But it's not true. And we're finally starting to get to a place on sort of like the numbers side and the narrative side where we're able to finally show all this stuff. But you know, again, we've not been knowing this stuff is happening anyways, because people have been saying it's happening. It's just whether or not we've been able to sort of support them with these numbers. But no, I don't know. I mean, my personal opinion is whether or not it's worth a shot to not have those things, because what we've got now is quite possibly the worst possible way to address these issues.
Right.
Yeah. The next question is, have any of you ever considered running for office? Why or why not?
Actually, yes, I am. I'm right now looking at running for Houston City Council next year, or for a state seat in the legislature. The best way to beat the enemy is to not necessarily become part of the system, but to actually be in a position where you can influence law. I want to practice law and I want to legislate so that since they won't write it, I will. It might not be successful right away, but at least somebody has to try. And I think people like Garnett Coleman, Sophronia Thompson, you know, all of these, Elma Allen, and, you know, a few other people that are in the Texas legislature. Sylvia Garcia, who's leaving to run for Congress right now, who's on the ballot today to run for Congress to replace Jean Green. Those are the kind of people who ask what needs to be done. And those people, I'm not to sound ageist, but they are moving on to other places, and we need to start looking at people to fill that void. Because at the end of the day, we could talk about we hate electoral politics, but either we're gonna let people legislate us and take our personal autonomy away, or we can take it ourselves and make sure that people never have that happen.
Yeah, my answer is hell no. But I would support, you know, what Ashton was saying in Ashton in office. It's a really important job. It's not really suited to my personality. I think it's a lot of BS. It's a lot of, you know, rubbing elbows, and that's not really my thing. I prefer kind of being behind reading and writing and then talking to people, but more on my terms than on a political level. But, you know, there's really impressive, important historical figures, and people have a lot of power in those positions. I don't know a lot about Texas history. I'm not from here, but I just learned about Congressman Cornelio. He was a Mexican guy, lawyer, went to Michigan law school, moved back to Texas, and, you know, led an effort to make sure that persons were prosecuted for lynching of Mexicans in Texas. What a badass. We need more people like that. So absolutely supportive of good people. I would never do it.
Yeah, well, I have the same personal objection, but also, like, I would never do it, but also I don't, the world doesn't need another white guy that like making decisions. I think for me, it really is a matter of supporting candidates of color and women candidates that, and again, I'm happy to give anybody any information they need, but like it's less effective for me to tell a story, right? Like my lived experience in this it's kind of funny because I was an idiot as a teenager, but it's not the same experience of the problems that actually need to be addressed. And I think it is important that we look to, you know, people of color and women to help solve a lot of the problems that folks that look like me have gotten us into.
So the next question is criminal justice reform and related issues best tackled at the local, state, or national arena?
All of the above.
All of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
I mean, as sure as I will go testify to the Texas legislature and the Senate and the House, I have testified before Congress before. I have worked for Sheila Jackson Lee. I was in the office watching her stop deportations, not just of Latinx people, but of people from the entire continent of Africa. Like, there are a lot of immigrants in Houston, y'all, who range in spectrum from race. And what I've learned from that experience is that when you work in those offices, you get those internships, you go for the networking experience and you go for all of those different things. But yeah, I mean, that's it. Yeah.
I would say it all fits together too, right? Like you don't necessarily have to make that choice. Like through our local work, we've been connected to statewide groups, and then we get connected to national groups And I think it's one of these, kind of like the question about how we were going to fix private prisons, where if you're looking at it like, what like realm do I want to like impact? Like you may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Yeah. Like it's about finding an issue, and that issue, the issue of bail is both a local, state, and national issue. These criminal, there's not. I can't think of a state that's good on criminal justice issues, and there's
not really.
Some Oakland and some of those cities are starting to come around on locally on rules, but everything impacts everything. The local work that we did here in HISD last year, and I barely did it, but it was more Texas Appleseed, but like to get those suspensions done, like that went, the legislature then considered it, right? Like. And so you can, all three sort of interplay with each other.
Until they pass bills like 1842.
Yeah.
Just don't forget about the local, Sometimes the national is sexier or the statewide gets more attention, but the local is important.
And also
school board and
You know city. What I found, just speaking from a national footing, I do a lot of work nationally with different organizations. I'm an atheist, so I work with very few people. There are very few black people who are identified in the atheist community, whether they're humanist or agnostic or what have you. But we're now coming out and saying that we exist in this particular realm as well. And how does that look? I'm just using it as an example. Representation is extremely important, but representation followed by actual success and work that benefits masses, as opposed to a position that's saying that you're the first African American person, a black person to do something, right? It's always about first, as opposed to the benefit of all. So I think that, I'm just kind of flustered a little bit because two things happened today. And I'm getting slightly off topic, but it'll make sense in a second. A friend of mine, Larry Green, died this morning. And he was a Houston City Council member. So they announced his death during the city council meeting today. And the reason why that's important is when you find out what people have done after they died, as opposed to knowing what they've done while they've lived, and how you can plug into that, right? Which means that, for example, if I died today or tomorrow, somebody will be there to pick up where I left off. But make sure that in taking in all of the answers from these questions that you're asking, that you take responsibility for your actions, right? And so that everything that we just told you, that you implement it in your own way, and make sure that you're not doing something that challenges your own integrity, but increases your integrity, so to speak.
So the next question is, do you think that reform can be accomplished through policy, or will it ultimately require changes in attitude regarding implicit biases and racism?
Yes. Yeah, policy is going to be a reflection of something that's already real, that's happening before it gets there, right? So I think that, to exclusively focus on policy would be a mistake, and not recognizing the tremendous amount of work that it takes for organizers or community activists or members of communities to get there, to that policy. At the end of the day, when I talk about the law, even though I'm a lawyer, it is antique. Some of those things are old. Some of those, we don't even know what some of the laws are. And they're not true to life because they move at such a slow pace. And, as an organism, as a human being, you're changing constantly. And your environment's changing constantly, and we're influencing each other constantly. So it's a strange question in terms of better or worse, but it's important to know that policy is, by the time it gets there, a lot of things have happened, and then when it's there, it's going to be applied, which is another form of it being alive, but really it's still limited in the way that it was written. So, the work that's done within a community to be accountable to certain principles is more important than policy.
Policy is one part of it, but cultural competence while making the policy is extremely important, and making sure that you have factual and accurate information, and also buy-in, right? So you have the policy, and then you also have community advocacy, where you're getting out there, you're informing people, and then you get them to come in. Basically, the role I play in that context is to just put it there and let you digest it and maybe guide you to where you need to go to do something. Again, policy is important, but if you don't have the advocacy and the connection to community, whatever community you're in or communities that you want to help, it'll be kind of moot because people will be asking you, well, why are you doing this and what is this for? And like a salesman, if you've ever worked in a store before, you can't get frustrated, right? Because they don't know that somebody 5 minutes earlier asked you the same question and you're constantly getting the same question over and over again. So to avoid that question, make sure that you're dotting your I's and you're crossing your T's. And that means that you're reaching out to the people who you know that maybe can reach certain groups better than you can, right? And making sure that when we do it, we have it that's something that's fair and something that is powerful, because once you have the backing of community, not only will the policy work, you're actually changing minds. You're teaching people to unlearn shit. Because in this movement for Black Lives, for example, there's a lot of times I keep hearing this, a lot of people in reference to the LGBTQ community saying, well, I guess only some Black Lives Matter. Well, the majority of the chapters of the BLM movement specifically, including the founders, are queer or LGBT identified, and mostly women, right? And then they confuse us with this quote-unquote term, hotep, which is actually a good term that's been repurposed to talk about people who are ashy as hell. Google that, because I don't have time to explain it. Who are ashy as hell, who say things like women should be barefoot and pregnant and taking care of their man at the same time. We've moved past that. That shit is coming on. The BLM movement is full of LGBTQ people who happen to be black. But the thing that I've noticed is that they take people like us and they pigeonhole us. I'm automatically perceived as heterosexual now because I'm a part of the Black Lives Matter movement. I've literally been called homophobic. Literally. Homophobic. So the point that I'm trying to make is that not only is policy important, but education and that advocacy for that policy is important as well, because you're teaching people, no, you cannot disrespect trans people. No, you can't call her that. No, you can't refer to her as this. No, you can't touch me like this. No, you can't talk to me like that. Because what happens is when we go talk to people about community buy-in, they have these questions about, well, I don't want to deal with it because this person is this, and I don't want to work with them as opposed to seeing the greater good. So remember, policy is good, but education is better.
Yeah, I mean, I will just echo what they both said, that policy has to start with the community, and it cannot be something that's written, you know, even with good intentions. If you write a policy document and you haven't talked to the people that are affected by that policy, then you've just got a piece of paper. Because without those people talking about their experiences, sharing their experiences, you don't really have a good case for that policy other than numbers and, you know, all that stuff. But the case that needs to be made for criminal justice reform is not a number crunching case. It's a human case, whether or not we want to be a part of the system that criminalizes and cages, you know, black and brown folks. And that's not, I can't write a policy dissertation on that. Like that's a question that has to be answered by the black, like in concert working, but like we have to bring those voices into the conversation before we can come up with that policy.
All right, so that's our last question, just due to time-wise. Is there any work Rice students can do at your organizations?
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
We had student interns from Rice last summer and last fall, actually. They were wonderful at Texas Civil Rights Project. So again, we do lawsuits, but sometimes we also write reports, and it's kind of research that's more sociological. Other times it'll be more legal research. Other times it'll be just kind of helping us engage with the community, dealing with intake, helping us analyze, you know, this what the intake means. So we love our interns. We love Rice students. Yes, if you want to work with TCRP, call me.
So
You're hired.
You have organizations right here on campus, Circle, Dr. Anthony Penn. he does a lot of work on campus. He's actually a professor here. Again, I would refer to Brandon Mack and like quite a few other people who are on campus who are seriously involved in activism. Like you have people, you walk past people every day who literally walk with me into spaces to get things done. You just need to know who to talk to. That's all it is, right? And then I would also start by interning. That was something that was very helpful for me, interning with Sheila Jackson Lee. I actually even interned at the Texas legislature for a little while during the formation of the Sandra Bland Act to understand how things worked and how things, how bills were shaped and formed, for example. But to know how things work is something that you will need to get you through whatever endeavors you might take in activism, so to speak, right? Because activism looks different for everybody, but just make sure that when you get out there and you open your mouth, you know what the hell you're talking about and you know who to talk to.
Yeah, we will accept anyone that is interested. If you would like to help, same spiel as Nada, just call me. We don't have a time commitment. Yeah, like if you're interested in it, we can find a way to bring you into the loop and get you some work.
Awesome. So we want to go ahead and thank our panelists and give them like a giant round of applause. And so as we talked about, one of the main things that we did this semester as a part of Associate 309 with Dr. Considine was organizing this panel, but that's not all we're doing. And we wanted to make an educational resource to help not only to like help you guys get informed on different issues regarding like policy, policing, alternative narratives, but also like highlight some of the work that other organizations are doing on a national level, but also to use it as a tool for what you guys can do to get involved. So our link is on the whiteboard right there, and it's Reform Now, Rice University Students for Criminal Justice Reform. And do you want to show them?
Yeah, so basically we have a bunch of resources. If you go to like get involved, we have a bunch of organizations by state, how to contact local officials, and more information about like solutions, what the problems are, and just like learning more about the issues. So we feel like it's just a really good resource to use after this panel to stay involved in case you guys need any more resources, I guess.
Yeah, and there's also a Learn More tab that puts you in connection with different books, podcasts, Twitter accounts, films, websites, and every single one of those names is a link, so it'll like link you directly to that resource. So yeah, thank you guys for coming, and again, thank you guys so much for coming and speaking. That was great. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.